today. So as Keren mentioned, we're not running this session as experts, but really as wanting to share, some of the things that we've been reading about and thinking about, and also to hear from you what you've been thinking about and wondering about and working on over the last few, 2 months now, I think, of living in this new sort of reality. So we will keep our talking to a minimum at the start. I'll talk a bit about adapting evaluation more broadly, and then Keren will talk specifically about online engagement. And then we'll break up into discussion groups for about half an hour at least to work on the topics and kinds of questions that you want to focus on. We're going to do that randomly, so you might meet some new people this afternoon, which will be great. And we want to wrap up and share some top highlights from each of the groups as well. So we can't all wear name tags, but you'll have noticed, I think all of you seem to have names that vaguely resemble your own names. Often when we start this Zoom, it has computer 3457. But I'm wondering, just when we get started, what might be nice is if you hover over your own image in the Zoom, you can see an ellipses in the top. Now I'm going to get my left and right corner. And if you click on that, you can click rename. And so if you can put your name where you are, and if you're happy to share how you are feeling this afternoon, because this might be something for conversation when you get into the breakout groups. It might be you're curious, it might be you're anxious, you might be excited. I personally am feeling rather stretched today. So that's what I'm going to put on mine. We'll have time to properly introduce ourselves later in the session, but this is just a way we can all get started. Is everyone able to adjust their name and where they are? Okay, excellent. So then just thinking about, how have evaluators been adapting, and how is evaluation adapting to the context that we're in now? So there's some particularly different ways we can think about how can evaluation be useful in this context, and then how can we adapt our evaluation practices where we're in the middle of existing evaluations. So I think in terms of how evaluation and evaluative thinking can help right now, Michael Quinn-Patton specifically said, we've got to be offering specific practical help. We shouldn't be expecting others to think about how we might be useful to them. They don't have the bandwidth for it. So what can we suggest? And, his other point was we're all developmental evaluators now. So what can we do that's useful as people evolve their approaches and evolve their responses to the pandemic? Can we support real-time sense making? Can we enable informed reactions and then refinements to those reactions that people are having to make on the fly? How can we help people make the best use of their existing data? How can we help them to understand the facts? Because some of that existing data might have a lot of holes in it, and it's not so much the problem that it has holes in it, but it's more like if you don't recognize where the holes are, you might use it in an inappropriate way. We can help them understand the systems, I think, and interconnections. There's probably never been a time where we've more strongly understood our interconnectedness as now. We can also help look out for potential unintended consequences of actions by having people slow down and pause while they've got to respond quickly. You don't want to respond in a way that's going to leave some people behind or have really negative impacts. We can also share what we're learning, like we're doing now. And I think the other point is, we've got to meet immediate needs, but we've got to keep an eye on the long game. We might be evaluating pandemic responses soon. So what data do we need to collect now to be able to do that effectively? I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Chris Corrigan. He's a Canadian facilitator. A few weeks ago, they with some colleagues, ran a session around real-time sense making, which we've captured in a process here. It builds on some systems thinking concepts. So you can use this tool to explore a question. In the workshop Chris ran, we were exploring what are the challenges for evaluators and people commissioning evaluation right now. And so we did a process of harvesting the data, observing what we were seeing and then stopping and pausing to think about what patterns we were seeing, what were the consistent things, what were some surprises, what were the things that we were not seeing that maybe we were expecting to see. And then pausing again before we thought, what were the insights, the things that we could act on in that data? Were there leverage points? Were there things that we could take advantage of now to start to see the things that we want to take forward from this context? My own colleagues at ARTD ran a session yesterday thinking about how we can help with some questions around react, reflect and refine phases. So, as people were responding to the pandemic, they had to react quickly, they had to move very, very fast. And so now probably it seems like from our conversations yesterday, people have a little bit more time to slow down and reflect. And so what are the questions that we can ask while we're reflecting? What are the possibilities to take forward? What's the data telling us about our response? Are certain people being left out? Is there any other possible explanation of that data? And then thinking about what that means for refinements. I suppose the conversations that we had yesterday was you can be at all of these phases and you can be cycling back and forth, but having a bit of a framework to think about what are the questions that we need to ask to make sure our reaction isn't having unintended consequences is a useful thing. As evaluators, one of our key roles is asking good questions. So I guess the other thing is adapting our existing evaluations, and probably all of you have been in the midst of this for some time now and will have your own insights. We've collated some of the resources around the web blogs that people have been sharing on what they're doing. And I think one of the threshold questions is, can your evaluation still be useful now? Or is it going to be too much for the people that are working on the project? And then if it can still be useful now, how can you adapt your evaluation questions to make it more useful? Can you record adaptations that are occurring in the program so you can understand the impacts of those? Can you assess how those adaptations are working? Can you help them identify which adjustments that have been made in this context are ones that they should continue and take forward? I think the other question is, can your methods still work now? And I think probably many of you have been shifting things online, and Keren will talk to us about how we can take a considered approach to shifting things online. And where you have a long-term evaluation where you've been planning to collect consistent data over time, how can you maintain some of those elements so you can see the patterns? Chris Lissy, who some of you might know as an evaluator/cartoonist, made this good quote, I thought, about getting the balance right, about whether we push forward with evaluation or we pause, recognising that some people might not have the bandwidth for it. Evaluation is the oxygen that powers decision making. Too little and we are likely to make poor decisions. And when faced with big challenges, we need more than usual. Too much evaluation without action leads to hyperventilation, analysis paralysis. As an evaluator, it is your responsibility to keep the breathing steady. The World Bank put out this kind of decision tree about whether to proceed and how to adapt your evaluations. You probably would need to adapt it to your context, but the top 4 questions could provide a useful framing for you to think about that. Should you adapt your evaluation questions and scope? Can you improve what remains feasible? Can you find ways around what is infeasible? And can you tap into alternative sources of evidence, some existing pieces of data? Michael Quinn-Patton also made the big point that we've got to be recognising and facilitating change. There's embrace the change. It's change in the program, and that means we should change our evaluation designs. We should accept change, we should facilitate change, we should document it. There's no business as usual right now. And if we don't see the change happening, we should probably prompt it. And Better Evaluation have started a series around managing evaluation right now. Their first blog is Managing Adaptively, and they've got a good range of questions that could be helpful to you. Starting to think about how the crisis has affected your stakeholders, whether you need to rethink your engagement activities, what sorts of decisions that need to be made now that you previously didn't have to make, who will have the authority to decide on those decisions, do you need to change, are there budget changes, and does that mean you need to change your design? How can you avoid any harm, and will you need to formally amend your terms of reference? I think one other sort of final point is around how we can think through the choices that we're making now. We need to recognise that the crisis is having differential impacts on different stakeholders and population groups in different countries. We need to consider things like taking an equity or a rights or a gender lens to the evaluations that we're undertaking. To consider what's missing if we just rely on existing data. While it might be useful, what might we miss? To consider equity and accessibility when we're adapting our methods and taking them online. And we need to be as purposeful in choosing an online method as we would be in choosing our methods generally. Not everything shifts from a face-to-face focus group to a Zoom. And we need to consider asynchronous as well as synchronous data collection methods. So that is all from me for now. So I will hand over to Keren.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Jade. So what I'm going to do now is share with you, I'll go to the top here. Just moving everything around. Share with you why has it gone like that? I'm not too sure. Can you see everyone? I think you can still see. So what I'm going to share with you is what we've been learning at the Institute for Sustainable Futures, and I have been basically gleaning from so many people. So I have to give credit to the team at ISF who have really been striving to learn and to adapt as quick as possible about new technologies and ways to do research and evaluation online. So one of the things that I think is quite useful is to think about working online is this model that we've come across, which is substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition, and to think about technologies in a way that, as Jade says, that you don't just sort of do one thing with another thing. It does have consequences. We know that we've all been in endless Zoom meetings and by the end of the day we're pretty knackered. We know that engaging with research participants or evaluation participants isn't the same, you know, face to face versus, you know, in someone's living room or in someone's lounge room or in someone's bedroom sometimes when they're trying to avoid young children. So I just wanted to talk with you about some of these ideas, and I think one of the things that Jade talked about is the opportunities that working in this way does provide, and what new possibilities we might explore as well. So substitution is, you know, basically sort of trying to use technology to just do what you were intending to do before or could do face to face, but now you're, you know, you don't have that face to face ability. So it might be a Zoom interview, for example. Augmentation is really about adding to that existing technology. So it might be the recording. So with Zoom, you can actually record your interview. You can go back and look at it. You can go back and read it. It's you know, it's a good possibility. Modification is really, yeah, it's about how do you change it somewhat, but you're still sort of getting the same outcome. Whereas, and we're starting to do some of those things within our teams, or, and I'll demonstrate a couple this afternoon with you, just so you get a sense of some of those things that we're doing: polls, whiteboarding, post-it noting, these things. And one of the things that we're starting to really try to look at is the notion of redefinition. So how can we use technology to achieve something that we couldn't have achieved before? And particularly in the space that I work, which is international development, the possibility of getting together multiple actors across multiple countries that may have not been able to engage in such a significant way before, because we had the ability to have the face-to-face, we had the ability to travel around, we had the ability to connect bilaterally, but we don't have that ability now. And so really redefining the way that we work to support new ways of thinking, new ways of practice, new ways of working together and collaborating. So yeah, I think it's really useful just to think about the methods that we use in evaluation, to think about, well, yeah, what critically examine, what are we doing? Are we substituting? Are we augmenting? Are we modifying? Or are we redefining? And I think part of the stretch for us is to redefine what we do. There's a really good resource that's has been prepared through a crowdsourcing process, which is all, you know, working remote, and it's put together from colleagues at the University of New South Wales, and they have brought together a compendium of different methods, different approaches that you could take to support remote data collection. So, you know, very creative processes around journaling, or workshopping, data collection, both sort of via primary means, but also secondary means. So it's well referenced, as well researched in terms of those methods and the pros and cons of those methods. So I just wanted to share that with people in case they weren't familiar. One of the things to think about technologies is to think about, well, what is the purpose of it? What is it for? And so we've got a whole range of different tools that people are using for engagement and collaboration. So basically, you know, sort of getting people together. This is an engagement process where, similar like we would have been at the Human Rights Commission HQ, like we have over the years, to get together to share and to be with each other. So, you know, this platform provides that really good tool. There are some excellent tools, and we've been starting to use these at ISF quite a bit in terms of mind mapping, brainstorming, whiteboarding. There's another option which we're all considering, which is turning our white walls into whiteboards by, you know, putting a bit of whiteboard paint on them. I think that would probably happen at the end of the year. But again, some of these tools are very effective. We have heard issues about them into, you know, bandwidth is an issue. So when you do have poor bandwidth, then sometimes it can be a struggle. Some colleagues just did some work with SBC in the Pacific, and they worked relatively well. There's some of these brainstorming activities, but they also have bandwidth issues. One of the things I wanted to share with you is so I'm going to put in the chat box. So I just encourage you all to copy and paste that link, and you will come to a Google Doc. You're all on mute, so I can't tell whether you are able to do this.
That reactions button at the end, at the bottom of their Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, there's a button that says reactions, and you can give us a thumbs up if you have got that document.
Great. Oh, thanks everyone. Thanks, Jade. Wonderful. Okay, so what you have here is basically a sticky note session. So this is standard facilitation techniques. So you should find on these pages just sticky dots. So you can just put your cursor, you can put your mouse over one of those sticky dots, and you can type something that you've learnt so far into this document, and then we will all in real time. So I'm going to type. So hopefully everyone is opening up that document. Is everyone in? Are they in the document?
I'm not sure whether others are having the same experience I am, Keren, but I can't enter. I'm typing away, but it's not going into the little post-its.
Me too.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's because it says at the top left, view only, and you click on it and it says, to make changes, ask the owner to edit access.
Right.
A little orange box in the top left.
Okay, all right.
Probably can only view, yep.
Technology. Yay, someone's typing in. Brilliant, it's working. Okay, so if everyone just copies and pastes that into their browser, you should be able to type in. You can choose any page you wish. Some resources, methods, the New South Wales resource. Just find a new post-it note and just have a go at typing. Google Docs, even this resource is quite interesting. The substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition method. Adults are incredibly adaptive to next technologies. That's very true. There's multiple software. Great, I'm just going to give you a couple more minutes. Lots of resources available. So this Google Docs is, this Google Slides is yeah, it's really good for group activities, for quick brainstorming activities to get different people engaged. We used it yesterday. We've been using it pretty much every day in various workshops and processes.
I think
Okay, another.
one person has put in the chat that they can't use it because they don't have a Google account. So that's probably a tip for some people for next time.
Yeah, and this is an issue that we wanted to talk about, which is one around equity and accessibility of these resources for different people as well. We want to share with you now another tool to provide you another tool, and I'm sure many of you have seen this already, but I'm just going to put up here a poll. So everyone should see on their screen a poll. Can everyone see it? If you can give me a thumbs up or your tick or your clapping hand, just to say whether you see it. Fantastic, great, thanks everyone. So one of the things we just want to learn about is yeah, what are priority issues for you? So if you can just complete the poll and tick, you can tick as many as you want. It's multiple responses.
And this will help us think about what's of interest to people as they go out into those breakout room discussions as well.
Great. I can see who has completed. So 21 people out of our 26 participants have completed so far. So for those that want to have a few more minutes to complete, that would be great. Technology, yep.
Keren, there, it'll just be out of 23 because you, Greg, and I don't get it.
Oh, okay, great. All right. So I can show you the results here. I don't think people can see the results, can they? Okay, so here's the results of the poll. Can everyone see that? I think so. So the planned evaluation shifting dramatically, that wasn't such a big concern for people, though 35% of people thought that was an issue. Technology to support my evaluation, so about half the group are considering that as being quite important. Equity concerns, again, more than half have identified that as an important issue to discuss. Ethical considerations, not as important. Evaluations, whether they meet criteria of merit and integrity, especially when we're collecting data online and doing these processes remotely, not such a concern for people. But again, another concern was for people learning how to work remotely as well. So these, we just wanted to gauge your interest, your concern, your consideration of some of the issues that we're grappling with.
Keren, I think people are not seeing the results, so you might have to hit end polling first before you share. There you go. And then if you hit share. Can people see that now? Maybe we can do that again. Okay.
Thank you. So learning new technologies, that's the priority topic for people. And as I'm demonstrating, it's not that easy. Another area is around, technology and equity concerns. So what we wanted to do was just get a sense of what people were interested in talking about, and the idea of this being a space for us to discuss and learn and share together. What we're going to do now is go into breakout rooms. Greg has placed us in breakout rooms. So hopefully everyone can see this slide. I think you can see it, Jade. Yep, great. Okay, so we're going to break you out into groups of 5, just because that's enabling of everyone to have a voice and everyone to have a discussion. In the breakout rooms, just very brief introductions, just so you get a sense of who you're talking to. If you could assign one person to report back, so this is self-facilitated process, but we're really interested in having a brief report back from each group when we come back to the whole group. So just to decide which person is going to give a 1-minute report back. What was the key topic, key takeaway that you wanted to share to the group? And what we're suggesting is that you focus your discussion around what's working well, we're all continuing to do our work as evaluators and as programmers, as commissioners of evaluations as well, this whole space, what's working well and how you're adapting to this new reality. What are you struggling with? What are some of the concerns that you have? Yeah, what needs to continue to change for you and your organisation? And also, what are you curious about? So what sort of new opportunities, new possibilities do you envisage and that you want to learn about going forward? So we're going to
break away as well, Keren. Someone just asked how long we'll be in there for. So we think about 30 minutes. And we'll try and broadcast you a message before you come back, like a 5-minute warning.
Great, thanks.
So ready to go to rooms now?
Yep, ready to go to rooms.
And just give one other message. Remember when you hit on which room you're joining to, what number room it is. Because when we ask you to report back, we'll ask group 1, 2, 3, 4, etc.
Okay, away you go.
One of my colleagues pointed this out to me. I think it's from a book called Forever Skills. And her point was, we are encountering people all the time saying everything's changed, which creates an immense amount of anxiety. And probably there's already an immense amount of anxiety about evaluation. As I'm sure many of you know, people don't always welcome evaluators into the mix. So she pointed out that this model is a good way of thinking about things right now. So yes, some things are changing, but there are also some things that are unchanging that we can lean into. There are things about evaluation that are still true. You know, we're still assessing the value, the merit, worth, significance of a thing. We're still unpacking values. The core of what we are isn't really changing. And so that can kind of help us work through what is changing, but also that what is changing can help us think about what needs changing. So perhaps some of our methods were not so inclusive before. When we're running a face-to-face focus group, that might not be accessible for people with different types of disability, other sort of equity issues as well. So there's really are a lot of opportunity for us to make a difference now and to think about how we want to shape things for evaluation going forward. So